As you know, Ken, at the moment, the penetration of internet in Nigeria is growing exponentially, actually, in terms of the availability of smartphones and feature phones that can access the internet. So we in Nigeria have about an 83% sort of penetration, and maybe eyeballs to the internet in the region of around 80 or so million Nigerians that have access to the internet. There are various ways of accessing the internet. Obviously, the very basic way is to obviously have an internet exchange position where you put in your browser, or you could have an open view via one of the OTT players. So at the moment in Nigeria, most people utilize and access the internet via their devices, which is a mobile device, and typically either has one of these browsers or an exchange into a device that's hard-coded to actually go through a platform. So in terms of the access to the internet, it's obviously not protected. What do I mean by that? You know, anyone who picks up your mobile phone, whether it's a child under 5 or an adult, can access any information. So we don't really filter information in Nigeria like some other countries where they actually filter out sensitive and maybe information that may be viewed unpleasant to those that are under 5.
All right, then, but I would like you to speak to the biggest concerns you see regarding safety on the internet for businesses.
Well, safety, really, when I look at the social aspect, as I've just narrated, is a very important part, and we can't really divorce and, let's say, sort of sweep that aside. The issues around internet usage for businesses is really around security, and security to prevent cyber attacks, fraudulent behavior, and also scams. You know, those are the 3 big areas that are focused and impinging on the way we use the internet for businesses. You know, if you look at most of the internet access via the multinational corporates, they actually use a slightly more secure way of actually uploading their data to maybe the HQ, which might reside outside Nigeria. If you look at the SMEs predominantly are using mobile devices, and those are latched onto the mobile networks. And the mobile networks and the gateway to the internet exchange point, whether that might be in the world, may not have some of the filters that the enterprise businesses may have. So from an enterprise point of view, I think a majority of them do use a private network, you know, like a VPN network, and it might be running on a specific protocol. So, you know, in terms of how they use it, in terms of transmitting data, that's well covered. The aspect, though, that they might have some exposure is really the users, the employees. And everything is obviously knowing your customer, so KYC, or actually having information on your employees to ensure that certain sensitive data is only accessed by certain individuals in the organization. And so that's much more wider than just using the internet. That's really the basis of how you share and access information that's very sensitive to an organization and corporate.
All right, then. Last year we saw, you know, ransomware, you know, taking center stage, and we had other attacks, numerous attacks happen across the world. What do you see for 2019? What do you think will be the key theme for 2019 regarding, you know, the threats to businesses?
You know, there's a lot of information now that we need to data mine. And I see the threat that we have in Africa is that we've not actually started to introduce big data and analytics in the way that actually allows us to prevent such attacks. So really, personal data is an area that I see may be vulnerable to any businesses that is operating in the shores of Africa, because most of the data really resides outside Africa. If you know, as you know, a lot of the websites are hosted outside the shores of Africa. So the intention really is, how do we actually create an infrastructure in Africa, and especially in Nigeria's case, how do we actually utilize the data centers that we have here to localize data? And that's one of the areas where once we can localize data, then we have some form of data schematic that we can actually start to employ and adopt to actually start to understand exactly what data is being used, by who, and for what purposes. At the moment, that's very much unstructured in its nature. So we need to get back to basics and see how we can actually understand how our data is being utilized. So that's the fundamentals. So yeah, big data, analytics, and understanding, who's actually accessing personal data is the next big thing for 2019.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned the know your customer point there, because I was actually going to look at privacy as well, and then we've seen a lot of impersonation, happening on online platforms.
Yes, there's fake news, and obviously there's ID theft. That's a big one, as obviously we are big users of Facebook and WhatsApp and other platforms. I mean, I think any user, whether you're a consumer or you're a business, you really have to understand, what information is out there. And you do need data managers in each organization that actually controls and manages the information that is put out there, especially with organizations, because they are the data scientists out there that understand, how to create patterns and actually how to mimic your behavior. So, that's an area that I think that we need to focus on. And then adopting artificial intelligence that is really much more African sensitive. What do I mean by African sensitive is that some of the algorithms are much more tweaked to our nuances, as opposed to just adopting in a cut and paste form AI technology that works abroad that might not be essentially sensitive to the way we operate in Africa.
And then when you look at some chat platforms, we see also incidents of cyberbullying taking place there. Do you think what more do you think needs to be done to make people more digitally civil?
I think that awareness is very important, and especially, and I think you're speaking more to the social part, so I think I'll take that line. Children, as they get onto accessing the internet, need to be educated, not only in schools, but by parents and at home, how information is kept on the internet and which sites are particularly useful for them and for their development. And then obviously we have parental controls. I think parents can obviously use those facilities. They are activated, can be activated on your basic browser. I think parents should utilize those features and functionalities. And then when you get to the enterprise, for instance, you mentioned cyberbullying. There are ways, again, using data management and the IT department actually turning on some filters. That will help as well. And then obviously bringing in your own device is a particular challenge for any organization, because obviously those devices are personalized to individuals. But there has to be some form of control and procedure as to how those devices are accessing company information, and more importantly, how they're accessing social media and internet sites. So, those are areas that I think that one has to focus on. There isn't a one size fits all solution to this. It's really has to be tailor-made to each customers and employees' requirements. The next area that we need to really look at is the way we use the mobile device and interact with e-payment platforms, and especially that we are trying to increase the number of people who will be financially included. We have to look at some of the ways that the protocols are actually used and embedded in the GSM networks. So something like SS7 filters and firewalls need to be adopted, and sooner rather than later, to prevent USSD hacks and a few other issues that have come up with SIM card swaps.
All right then. Thank you so much, Olusola Teniola there. He's the president of the Association of Telecommunication Companies of Nigeria.